Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm your host today, Bill Bernard, Vice President of Security and Content Strategy here at Deepwatch. We're going to go ahead and get started, but just a couple of housekeeping items to begin with. The first is that this webinar is, of course, being recorded. We're going to make sure that that's available to you after this event, so look for invitations in your email to view the recording. Additionally, we are happy to take questions through the Q&A interface within the system. If we don't get to those questions today on the call, we will absolutely follow up with you afterwards. So we're here to talk about Deepwatch's 2024 annual ATI threat report. Our mission is to help our customers achieve true cyber resilience, and our security experts leverage our managed security platform to provide enterprises with 24/7, 365 rapid detections, high fidelity alerts, reduced false positives, and automated actions. As I mentioned, I'm Bill Bernard. I'm your host today, Vice President of Security Content and Strategy here at Deepwatch. And we've got two of our fantastic Deepwatch experts here. No reason for me to introduce them. I'll let them introduce themselves. Eric, let's go ahead and start with you, sir.
Thank you, Bill. Glad to be here. My name is Eric Ford, and I'm the Senior Threat Intelligence Analyst within the Adversary Tactics and Intelligence team. Kyle, your turn.
How you doing? My name is Kyle Shaffer. I am the Director of Operations at Deepwatch, and I am not as smart as Eric is, and I will be supporting him.
So, false modesty aside, let's go ahead and jump in, guys. One of the first observations that sticks out in the threat report this year is that half of all incidents Deepwatch responded to started out with suspicious activities and account compromises. Eric, for anybody who doesn't understand Deepwatch's definition of what suspicious activity is, could you please walk us through what are the sorts of things that we consider to be suspicious activities?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for highlighting the observation from the report. Suspicious activities.
I know, easy to say.
Yeah. Refers to unusual or out-of-place actions on the network, like strange login time or unexpected data access. A lot of times these can actually lead into further malicious activity, malware deployment, ransomware, data exfiltration, actions of those nature.
Eric, is it fair to say that these are sort of the user level suspicious things going on?
Not always. They can be, but not always.
Okay. Any examples of ones that aren't user behavior focused?
Use like a PowerShell command that's reaching out, like a PowerShell download cradle that's reaching out, downloading a file. That would not be something that a user would be able to see, but it would be something that would be suspicious in and of itself.
Awesome. Thank you. So Kyle, having sort of defined suspicious activities, I think it would be helpful to everybody to understand, well, what else is out there that isn't a suspicious activity or obviously, an account compromise kind of a thing. So what are some of the things that Deepwatch sees as the causes of the other half, or the initial steps in the other half of incidents we were involved in?
Yeah, so my immediate attention is brought to vendor tool compromises, whether that be an internet-facing device, such as an edge device that's hosting an application that's being leveraged through RCEs or something reaching out. Again, in a way, suspicious, but vendor tools are really a big focus that we have from the Deepwatch perspective in terms of the other 50% of the compromises that are occurring, the trusted elements within your environment. You use these tools day in and day out. You're not expecting anything to happen, and all of a sudden it's popped, right? Or all of a sudden a CVE comes out and you were a day or two behind on reading up on it, and that activity doesn't even look suspicious. It just looks like what your tool's been doing this entire time. And then this ends up leading to an incident, and if you're not quick about it, it could be a couple of days behind.
Awesome. Thank you. So, Kyle, I'm going to stick with you for a minute. As we said, half or so of the incidents included account compromises, one of the very, very early steps that we saw. With that, the report goes on to recommend an updated focus on email security. Would you elaborate on that a bit?
Right. So, I mean, this is not going to change ever in the cybersecurity landscape. Attackers are going to focus on the area of least resistance. And for a long time, that area of least resistance is going to be us. With the advancements of AI and with just LLMs in general, we're able to craft language models that can write things for us that look very convincing. What is one way to be able to spot phishing emails in the past? Well, there's a lot of spelling mistakes, right? You get something and you go, okay, well, that couldn't have come from my trusted provider because they would have vetted that before it went out. Well, now anybody can go into something as simple as an OpenAI platform, and they can write up an email and have it look fantastic. Look, actually, you can put in a template from someone else's email and just have it spit out the exact same thing. Now you have a perfect spelling email that can go out to victims and attach a slew of different attacks there and make it a really easy sector to target, even easier than it was prior. We have dedicated so much time towards email security, and to watch that vector of attack almost become more available than less available, it's definitely a cause for concern. It's something that we should definitely focus on. What that means is further vetting for phishing emails, for malware links and emails, further vetting for links clicked in and 200 Ks out. From a proxy perspective, all of those things are things that Deepwatch is taking a deeper eye on and a harder look, because as days go on, it becomes more difficult for anyone to spot what is a phishing email and what isn't a phishing email any longer.
I think you're really also describing part of the problem that we've seen with business email compromise as well, right? It's become so much easier to impersonate that trusted person within the company, whether it's email or text or other solutions as well.
Yeah, that's perfect for sure. One thing is, there's a lot of organizations, you don't trust anything that comes from the outside, right? If you're not working in an outside facing role, anything that comes in your brain might be immediately, thought of as spam. But what if an email comes in from somebody inside your organization that you thought you did trust, right? Again, writing things that look very convincing, using templates based off of what you've had prior, and then getting an email from, maybe Bill, you sent me an email a week ago, right? I trust Bill a lot, so I click into that email, and it turns out it wasn't Bill, right? Bill was compromised, BEC, and Bill's attacker was using various platforms in order to write emails that look just like Bill. They sound just like Bill, and now I've gotten popped, and this just goes down the chain.
So, Eric, the report goes on, thinking about email, thinking about the other things that were happening, thinking about how so many of the events that we were involved with over the past year really recommend a focus on employee security training. Now, there's been the argument back and forth for forever about the efficacy of that, but what are some of the findings that made us suggest and the places where we should be focusing that employee security training according to our findings?
I think first, just being able to recognize phishing emails and also conducting simulation training exercises that helps the employees get into the mindset. Training should also include multi-factor authentication use, why it's being used, and proper password development. Also recognizing and reporting odd behavior. So, for instance, if you get an email and there's an attachment and you click on attachment, but it takes you to a website, that's not normally normal behavior. It should open up a file, not a website. Those type of things, I think, will go a long way.
I mean, not to put words in your mouth, but is it fair to suggest that part of what we have to do is help employees recognize when they should raise their hand and ask for help from their security partners within the company? Because it seems to me that, just so much of the employee training that we have around cybersecurity really focuses on, you have to go make a good decision.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So
your point. Oh, sorry.
Right ahead, Kyle.
Work about the employee training and, more importantly, doing scheduled phishing exercises. That's always been, I think, a positive impact, as well as assuming that the company follows up on that training and make sure that people are, following those, and if not, get additional training. There's a kind of a thing that we do, at least in my management group that I have. You fail one of those phishing things, your Slack emoji is a little dunce cap for a week. Okay. Now That's just a little bit of fun that we do, but also it's important to know that, hey, anyone can fall for one of those, right? And then when you do, you need to make sure that you are, being retrained appropriately. And if you can make them quite elaborate, and it really does make them second guess. I mean, I will tell you right now, I do not want to wear that thumbs cap Slack emoji for a week, given my reputation, right? So it's really important every time I get a link to a Jira that I make sure, hey, is that actually a real link, or is that a phishing exercise, or is that, potential, malicious attachment? I want to right click that and take a deeper look.
I think, Kyle, part of what you're suggesting is we have to have fun with it. We have to make it interesting, but we also have to make sure that we're not, through those education efforts, scaring people out of admitting when they might have made the mistake, and making sure that they understand that the security team is there to help them deal with it, as opposed to just chastising them for having made the mistake.
Absolutely, yes. And giving awareness that there is a reporting feature. Is there a report button that your organization has where they can report phishing? And are those phishing links going somewhere? And is there a team actually working them? Or is it just a button that just goes out into the void, right? And do the people who report those get feedback based on their reports, so that way they know that something actionable is happening? And are those alerts going to your MDR provider, right? All good questions to ask your internal organization to make sure if you have good email security.
Excellent. So actually, Kyle, I'm going to stick with you for this next question. But it really kind of goes to the question of, is there honor amongst thieves or not? We saw in 2023 a huge increase in double extortion ransomware, right? The idea that I've now extorted you to get control of your systems back, and oh, by the way, now you can pay me more not to release all the data that I supposedly at least got from you. We've seen that maybe some of the attackers are bluffing about that at times. But what does that say about the threat landscape as we pivoted now into 2024 and we're looking at the remainder of the year here?
So I equate this to basically attackers ensuring their own attack, right? So this is an industry. Attacking is an industry. It's cybercrime as a service, one might say. And you spend a lot of money and time and resources developing out ransomware techniques, tactics, tooling. You investigate, you scope your targets, you do all of this. This is all time intensive. And then when you compromise a customer and then you perform ransomware and encrypt their devices, you're expecting some sort of payment back, right? So you did a lot of time beforehand and now you're waiting for your reward, right? As we have companies develop that can do key capture and that can do wide scale reimaging and has plenty of backups, you're risking your investment that you spend from a cybersecurity perspective in that you made. Hey, I spent all this time training up all these people to be able to attack this network. They attacked it, and now I'm not getting my payment back. So what is another thing you can do? Well, we can exfiltrate all this data, and then we have a second insurance policy, basically. Hey, pay us the ransomware. No? Okay, well, I also have all of these goodies from you. I have these unreleased movies. I have this source code. I have all these things that we've seen in the past that we can use to leverage. And as legal starts to move towards not allowing potentially payments for ransomware for encryption, you have to kind of sweeten the pot with the encryption. Now, one thing I will say on that, the more that an attacker does, the more likely they are to be detected. So although they are taking more drastic measures, 2023 into 2024, definitely into 2025, right? In terms of being able to secure the load, so to speak. When you exfiltrate large amounts of data, you have opened yourself up to a larger area of investigation, and you are more likely to be caught because of that. So you've added an additional step towards your potential compromise in order to be identified. And if you are exfiltrating before you are encrypting, or potentially you're doing it at the same time, you may have, tipped your hat a little bit sooner than you were looking to tip beforehand. So there is risk to the attackers as well by doing that, but it is an ongoing trend that we're seeing, and we'll see it continue into the further years. These attackers, they want their money, and they're going to try and get their money any way they can.
Yeah, it's the business of cyber crime, I guess, that concerns me most as things are continuing along, because cybercrime implies that, of course, has to be dealt with by the authorities. This isn't something that you can, as a company, go be a vigilante and deal with. You've got to work with the authorities and all the complexities with that. Very, very disappointing. Eric, I want to pivot a little bit here. We also saw in 2023 a series of, I'll call them oldies but goodies involved and continuing to be common problems. The Quackbot, banking Trojan from 2008, still running around as part of modern day attacks. Cobalt Strike and Mimikatz, both intended as testing tools when they were written and produced in 2011, they're still in the midst of quite a number of attack processes here. Why do these still endure? How are we still vulnerable to these tool sets and these, frankly, in internet terms, ancient attack capabilities?
It is fascinating, but it's also troubling. They primarily remain prevalent because they work. These tools are tested, refined, and effective, making them go-to choices. There's also a rich resource pool for cyber criminals to use. There's lots of documentation. Vendors post blog posts every day about how these tools are being used and the techniques, and cyber criminals read those and they incorporate those. And lastly, they've also evolved to maintain their efficiency.
So from your perspective, is it really about the tools getting better at being attack tools? Or is it about, I'll call it perhaps some less than stellar defensive capabilities by organizations out there that just aren't keeping up with older attack patterns and are still susceptible to those?
That's a tough one. There seems to be a trend towards identifying and responding to the latest novel techniques while the old ones still work. How you might be able to touch more on the detection aspect of that.
Yeah, so detecting and preventing are two, I think, different things. So it's always easy to detect, right? So Mimikatz has a very specific signature. Detecting that isn't necessarily difficult. But MTTR or MTTN, mean time to notify, mean time to respond, might not directly match up with the attack speed or the time to kill that attackers have right now, which definitely does not help the environment at all. And then also you have to talk about just kind of like a CIA triad kind of approach here. Companies prioritize security in most cases, but at the expense sometimes of availability, right? Those two things kind of play in a hand. So we haven't really seen us move too far away from the same kind of authentication methodologies that we had beforehand, which really helps Mimikatz prevail. So when we look at, sure, we've probably plugged in MFA into most systems at this point. I'd say a vast majority of people are, enterprise environments are leveraging some level of MFA, but they haven't gone the full cycle over to maybe like a zero trust environment because they just simply don't have the architecture to do that yet. They're using a lot of legacy systems that are still plugged in. There's profits around those legacy systems that have to be moved over. I mean, it's kind of a slow push. And so because those technologies are moving at a slow rate to transition because of business needs, which is fully, it's understandable. Money makes the world go around, right? We can kind of see those tools tend to prevail. And then like Eric said, they've become, too advanced. Mimikatz, the exact signature and the exact capabilities of Mimikatz those many years in the past are not necessarily the exact same that it is today, right? It has advanced, but it's kept the same name and the same kind of a base feature set. And all of that is around, as companies, we evolve a little bit slower than our attackers do.
All right. So, we've looked back, we've looked at 2023, we've looked at the trends we saw, the things we saw. What are we extrapolating out? And I'm going to ask both of you to answer this. What are we extrapolating out from trends to expect here in 2024? And Eric, if I can, I'd like to start with you.
I see, and it's detailed in the report, information stealing malware getting more sophisticated. Recently, within the past couple months, there was one that was exploiting a flaw within Google cookies where it can restore them. I see a trend where information stealing malware will get more sophisticated over time.
Is that the authentication cookies you were referring to?
Yep.
Yeah, that one's a little scary. Okay. Kyle, any sage words for what you're expecting to see more of in 2024?
I think we're going to see a prevailing increase in vendor tool compromises as we move forward into the coming years. Time is something that is, there's a finite amount of time, right? So as we're testing against tools, this is something that's been done manually or through general Python scripts, right? Go scripts, in order to test against tools, whether that be bug hunting or whether that be through attackers, right? And so time is finite, and there's a certain amount of people that are able to do it. I keep pulling myself back to AI tools because that gives people time. And when you have more time on your plate, you have more time to spend it towards testing things. Publicly facing tools that everyone has access to only allows more and more testing to be used against it. And so vice versa, what you're going to see is you're going to see more vendor tool compromises and more increases. As a cybersecurity specialist, you should be looking towards securing your tools, and you should be looking towards building out incident response playbooks around that. We are too comfortable with the security of our tools. Whatever you're using from a vendor perspective, we don't think that's what's going to be compromised. Although generally speaking, it is user-based for a majority of them. What I see a lot in my experience through incident response and through SOC management has been, just generally individuals are not expecting that tool to be compromised. They're not expecting there to be a vulnerability that came out. They're not expecting these things to happen because they have a level of inherent trust with the vendor and making sure that they're up to date on that. And they're getting tested 24/7, 365 now through automation and advances in AI. And as a result, you're going to see more attacks around that.
I think one of the things that I've noticed so far, maybe this year as well, that doesn't bode well for the rest of the year, is successful supply chain attacks. We don't need to mention any of them by name, but we've seen a couple of big ones happen with huge real world implications. Hopefully, folks are able to diversify a little bit, not have all their eggs in one particular vendor's basket, or at the very least know who the competitors are that they may need to shift to if their vendor goes down for an extended period of time, or their vendor is unable to support them for an extended period of time. I know that's one that's got me very, very concerned for the rest of the year.
That's the scariest one, in my opinion, is definitely the supply chain compromises. We all took the normal, we all went through a cybersecurity background, and we all took probably very similar classes, and we all read all the books, through college on how to sandbox app updates. You should always have an app update in a pilot group first and then push it out to a larger group afterwards. That way that you can make sure that the impact around the code is up to date and it's secure, secure code sandboxing, even when you're deploying it within your own network, right? And then you have this other side where we're constantly pushing critical updates because there's issues wrong with potentially vendor tools or supply chain compromises. We're just saying, you don't have time for that. Fix it right now. Fix it right now. And there's another side where it's like, well, I want to put in a small group first and then push it out. And these are two competing ideologies that we're seeing very prevalent. So yes, it would be great if we were able to use a pilot group, alpha, beta, and then full production for even software updates or supply chain updates with environments. But what the actuality is, there's not a lot of us that are able to do things like that. And that just goes back to response, right? Some of those things, like a supply chain attack, will happen, and there's limited things that you can do to control that. But what you can do is you can control your incident response policies and how you respond to that. Someone who has an incident response plan written down, ready to go, that's trained, can respond to a vendor compromise or a supply chain compromise faster than a group that doesn't. It's just plain and simple right there.
All right. So I know that both of you get to see a lot of this stuff in real life in a way that I certainly don't. But one of the things that I know we talk about a lot is the criticality of, Kyle, I think I've heard you call this the golden hour, the time between maybe sort of kind of identifying that there's an incident that needs to have full DFIR support and the time that DFIR really actually gets involved. What's the advice that you want to share with folks, especially, again, given all the things we saw last year, on how to manage that golden hour and how to support themselves, or what to look for from a partner in terms of support when they're going from, hey, we think we've identified something, we're starting to raise the flag, starting to get worried about it, and now we've gotten our DFIR team, generally third party, of course, involved in helping us remediate and deal with that issue.
Yes, the golden hour. That is something that I commonly refer to it as, right? It's the time between you think that you have an incident and you're calling your DFIR, right? So there's a couple of things that you can work with. I mean, I've mentioned this a couple of times throughout this webinar, but an incident response playbook is number one. All of this should be written down. It should be vetted. And if you are partnered with an MDR, partnered with Deepwatch, have us review it, bring it up to us, let us see it so we can work collaboratively to make sure that your incident response playbook is up to snuff and ready to go. We have all been in this situation before. I know I have. My first incident that I ever worked in my career was my first incident that I ever worked in my career, right? And I had done a couple of tabletops before, but I've never done the real thing. And it never works the way that you think it's going to work in your head, right? You go to isolate a host using a technology. Oh, technology doesn't work. The isolation command didn't go through. Well, what do we do now? We don't know what we do now, right? We're freaking out. Our heads are running around. We're stressed. There's something in the environment. We don't know what to do. We say something over in our group. We say, take a breath, take a deep breath, right? Step one, before you do anything, before you call out our retainers, take a deep breath and collect your thoughts. You want defined roles and responsibilities when something like this goes off, and you want a scribe. A scribe is the number one thing I could recommend for anyone during the golden hour to make sure that things are documented correctly. So when you are handing something off to a DFIR team, that they know. As someone who's been on the DFRI team before and came in from that perspective, what I hear a lot is, well, I think that they were over there and it might have been this user account. And you're like, well, who's the user account? Well, we don't know which one it is. It's written down somewhere and they got sticky notes, and that golden hour goes away very fast. And then when you're with the DFIR team, now you're in not the golden hour, right? Now you have compromised systems. It's spreading wild. And that team has to try and figure out from a handoff, what's happening. And if you're not well documented, that just adds additional time to that response. So an incident response plan, having well-defined roles and responsibilities, running realistic tabletop exercises or purple teams. I definitely advise towards the purple team, little bias there. And just collecting information as much as you can in scope is a huge piece to do within the golden hour. Now, of course, those are response techniques and not necessarily response actions you should be doing. In terms of what you should be doing on host from an isolation perspective, all of those things change drastically depending on the type of incident you're in.
Kyle, thank you very much. Great answer there. Eric, thank you. Thank both of you for the insights and the thoughts today. Everyone, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you spending a half hour with us today for sort of the TLDR version of the ATI threat report for 2024. Don't forget, we'll be reaching out to you with a copy of this recording and, of course, a link to the written report so that you can read that as well for yourself. We thank you all for participating with us today, and we hope you have a great day.